How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning in to the long awaited season 2 of the Phil Talk Sports Movie Reviews with myself and Coach Luke. It's been a while. It's been over a year since we've done one of these, but we're back in the fold. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh yeah, I'm happy, especially with this movie.
Yeah, one of our favorites. And when we did our kind of prequel into season 2, we decided right on the fly which movie we would do first. And we went with the 2000 classic, which is weird to say the year 2000 and a classic in the same sentence, but what can you do? We're getting old. The Replacements, starring Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman. Also, I'd say he's a. Would you call him a co-star in this?
I don't know about a co-star. I don't know if he would accept that, but I'd say he I don't know. He's up there. It's between the two of them.
I mean, if I remember correctly, the box itself has both their names on the top. So I
Yeah.
think that by definition is a co-star. Like you said, I don't know that he'd accept that actually.
Right. Yeah. I think just starring and then both of them.
But this is a great sports movie, a great football movie. It is a fictional take on actual events in the 80s. The Washington Redskins did, in fact, suffer to the player strike, as the entire league did. And they had replacement players come in and win. In this movie, it's 3 out of 4 games. In reality, it's 3 games, and position them for the playoffs, where Washington does, in fact, go on to win the Super Bowl, too. So that's something to keep in mind for those that haven't seen it. And I want to get this part out of the way now. If you love this movie and you love the concept of this movie, and you want the real story, the ESPN 30 for 30 entitled Year of the Scab, definitely check that out. It is the real life documentary version of this movie, and they do mention this movie in the documentary plenty of times. They let you know who the actual players are that kind of get modeled after like their replacement counterparts and stuff. So definitely check out Year of the Scab if you love this movie like we do. So I just want to get that out of the way. So we're going to jump right into this. As if he's not a co-star, he's definitely the star. Keanu Reeves, coming fresh off of The Matrix in 1999. This comes out a year later, and he plays Shane Falco, the former Ohio State quarterback, a lefty, by the way, which that surprised me rewatching this movie. I didn't realize apparently Keanu Reeves is left-handed, and they just threw that in the movie too, because back in the day you didn't really if you had a lefty quarterback, it was like part of the story. It's like a left-handed pitcher in a baseball movie. They had to bring it up a bunch of times. They casually sneak it into this one here. But he plays a former, I guess you could call him a bust in the NFL, after losing a big Sugar Bowl game and then having a not so hot NFL career. He's then living on a houseboat in D.C., where he's recruited by Gene Hackman, who's the head coach in this movie. And him, along with a lot of other, it's a very land of misfits toys situation. They bring in guys that might have good assets, but they kind of have, some detriments as well. And they bring in, a lot of other, but really sneaky, well-known cast in this movie. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. A lot of up and comers who, at the time, we didn't really know. I mean, you had John Favreau on top of it, and nowadays he's directing. He directed Chef and Elf and Iron Man 1 and 2, and he stars in a lot of the stuff that he directs, or at least he'll play a cameo. But I think he's a great actor. This is back when he was really buff.
It's
Nowadays,
crazy to see him in shape. Like, I mean,
oh
we
yeah,
know him as like the husky dude, and like you said, like I think most people are gonna know him as Happy in these days, right?
yeah, from the MCU.
Yeah, but even in like I Love You Man, where he's like the jerk husband of one of the main character's best friends or whatever the case may be. But yeah, and he's always been a thick, stocky guy. He is in this too. He plays a former walk-on linebacker at Michigan State, who I guess he's like in a SWAT team. They show him like making drug busts and stuff as they're recruiting him. But yeah, he's a sneaky good character and a relatively unwell-known John Favreau at the time.
Yeah, and funny as hell in this movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Funny as hell. There's also Reese Ifans, who went on to become the Lizard in The Amazing Spider-Man, and spoiler alert, Spider-Man No Way Home. So you've got two kind of superhero-based actors. Actually, they were in the same. No, they were in No Way Home together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until just now.
A replacements reunion. I'm sure that's the first thing they talked about too.
I wonder if, well, they didn't have any scenes together, but that would have been cool if they still got to meet up and just kind of shoot the shit for a second.
They kind of do, because if you remember when he hits the field goal, he's got to chase him around to celebrate. So
well, I meant in No Way Home.
Oh, true. But they're on the set together, I guess.
I would hope so. I mean, it depends on when they shoot scenes, but yeah. So you got those two right there. At the time, though, in my opinion, this is years before Iron Man or The Amazing Spider-Man came out. I'd kind of consider them up and comers, even though they were clearly in their 30s at least.
Right.
But both of their roles were amazing. They were probably my two favorite characters. Danny Bateman was who John Favreau played, and then Nigel Gruff, the kicker, is
the
who
leg.
The leg, yeah,
Is
from
it
Wales.
is it the leg Nigel Gruff or is it Nigel the leg Gruff? What do you think it is?
I would prefer the second one.
Yeah.
I just think that sounds better.
Yeah,
You know, I
the
love when they make
suffix, not
someone's
the
nick.
prefix.
Well, yeah, I love when they make somebody's nickname their middle name.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I'll go with that. But yeah, I'd say Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman they carry most of the movie. You know, they're your headliner. You know, actors between the two of them, but a great supporting cast. Like we were saying, a lot of other actors, and I think you got a few
Yeah,
as well.
one guy that I didn't know much about the actor going into this, but the character he plays, Orlando Jones, he plays Clifford Franklin, the speedy wide receiver with hands of stone, is the best way I could describe him. He can beat anybody, but he can't make the catch until Stickum is introduced later into the movie. So he just plays like a really like this is a comedy. I don't know if I'd call this a comedy. It's probably a drama with comedy elements. But
Yeah.
him and Danny Bateman lead a lot of the comedy elements in this movie, I would say.
Oh yeah, Orlando Jones. He said.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, he was definitely one of the funniest characters. Sorry.
Yeah. And
But yeah,
I'll tell
I
a
found
quick,
myself laughing a lot more this time through, though.
I'll tell a quick funny Orlando Jones story. I was as I was doing research for this movie because this was a weird one to do research for because I know this movie like the back of my hand. I've seen it a million times. But when you go to review it, you want to remember all the little things, right?
Mhm.
So I'm doing some research, and Orlando Jones about 4 or 5 years ago was on the Dan Patrick Show, and it was about something else, but like he's one of those guys that if he's going to be on a talk show, they're going to bring up the replacements at some point.
Hmm.
So they asked him like, how did you get involved? You know, what was step one? Like, are you going to be in this movie? What do you do first? And I guess the first thing they did was they didn't have the whole team together, but you know the main stars like Keanu, John Fabio, people like that, Gene Hackman. They went to Baltimore Ravens training camp just to get like the vibe and like what to expect. And they would I don't want to say they like practice, but they got they got
They
out
did
there,
some
they
training.
ran around a little
Yeah.
bit, and apparently the one rule while out there was nobody can touch Keanu Reeves. Not even like don't lay a finger on him.
May as well put a red shirt on him like they did in
Like
the movie.
right?
I mean, from what I heard, they did a little bit of training because they wanted them to do most of their own stunts.
Mhm.
Probably not all of them, but make it seem more convincing at least. So, who else?
Another guy I want to throw in there. Every time I try to remember his name, I just
David
default.
David Dunman.
David Dedman,
Yeah.
Roy from The Office, who plays Brian Murphy. I always remember that part.
Yeah.
Brian Murphy, the deaf tight end, which that might be the most fictional part of the whole thing. Like, I was really looking forward to when I watched Year of the Scab and some other things. Like, they must have had a deaf player. Like, why would they have thrown that in there? Apparently, that was one of the more fictionalized parts of this movie. Because, again, this is a fictionalized take on factual events. But I really like how they pulled it in there because he was a local guy. Gallaudet University, which is the largest deaf university in the world, I think, definitely the country, is in Washington D.C. So it would make perfect sense why he is there.
Mhm.
And you might think they just put that in there as like, oh, isn't that interesting? But he comes up big on the field as well. And they bring up that had he not been deaf, he probably would have gone in the first round. So you do have a first round talent at tight end. So that definitely pays off for them later in the movie.
And that was his film debut. I found out today. That was the first film he ever did. I'm sure he did plenty of other TV show stuff, but yeah, that's what he's. I mean, he's most known for The Office.
Yeah.
He's done a few movies since then. But yeah, I think a lot of these actors at the time they were not totally unknown, but relatively unknown in comparison to how they are nowadays. And Gene Hackman, he is currently, after Sidney Poitier died, the oldest living person who holds the Best Actor award.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So him and Keanu definitely, were the right picks, I think, for this movie. And I gotta say it, but Shane Falco, what a cool fucking name! Like,
Oh yeah, I mean it's like Captain Falcon mixed with I don't know what exactly,
just
but yeah.
name Shane is great in general, but Falco as your last name, yeah,
I mean,
that's
to me, like if they wanted to throw some sci-fi in this, Shane Falco could have been the name of like our generation's Flash Gordon.
yeah.
It definitely could have been that way. One quick thing, like
He
Deadman,
was set up
if
to be a
he's-
heartbreaker
yeah.
back in high school.
If this is his movie debut, like it's gotta be interesting playing a deaf like it might take some edge off. You're not worrying about lines. You're just worrying about being in the right spot and showing the right emotion. And in
Yeah.
my 2 entire semesters taking American Sign Language, I can confirm that the signs when he would have to sign people, those were actual, like they didn't just make it up.
Legitimate
Yeah, because I think you get a lot of flack for doing that. It kind of like
I think
undermines
absolutely. Yeah.
the language. So like if you're gonna put sign language in a show or a movie or whatever, like you have to take the time to do it correctly.
Yeah, I think they did the same thing a little bit with Japanese in this movie because there was a big Japanese guy, lineman, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think he was
Former sumo
the
wrestler.
center, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't
Definitely
know.
a lineman. I don't know if he was the center necessarily. He could
Oh,
have. He
okay.
could have been,
Yeah.
but lineman
Well,
for sure.
definitely a lineman, yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, he had some Japanese. That was actually one of my favorite parts of it, and I might get into this later. Is how much the coach cared and invested in his players.
Right.
I'll get into that later. But
Talking about great names, Jimmy McGinty just sounds like a
was,
great accomplished coach.
oh, that was
That's
his name.
Hackman's
Oh
name.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you can even tell by the hat he wears throughout most of the
Yeah,
movie.
very
He's
Tom
one from
Landry
like the old
vibes
school,
with the hat. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, great cast overall. But yeah, so they're playing for the Washington Sentinels. They are the
Great name
replace.
there too, honestly. Like
Oh yeah,
not to some of the like I believe there's the New York Knights is one of the names, which is a solid name because it's like Statue of Liberty based. I think is what they're going off of there. The helmets
okay,
and stuff.
gotcha.
The other names you don't really get. You get Dallas, you get Phoenix, you get San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Detroit.
I think they Detroit.
Yeah.
But you don't get a lot of sense of what those teams are about. But as far as the Sentinels go, I think they did a good job. Like I bring up a movie like
Any given Sunday.
Any Given Sunday, thank you, where the Miami Sharks they're literally black jerseys, white numbers, right? Like
Yeah,
very
too
generic,
basic.
very basic. The Sentinels feel like they have an identity,
Yeah.
which doesn't in these fictional sports movies doesn't always come across that way.
Yeah. I mean, there was even another sports movie where they talked about how important it is to have identity, how important uniforms are. And that's just to like real teams in real life. I think it was Gridiron Gang.
Mhm.
When they finally get their actual jerseys,
Right.
he's like, you guys got to be playing in something nice.
Yeah.
And that makes it more real. And this movie definitely, they invested quite a bit of money into making this stuff. Even in the local bars in the background, you can see Washington Sentinel flags and foam fingers and posters and stuff like that. So they took that time to make this merchandise and stuff, which I'm sure some of the actors kept as memorabilia.
I once came across on like it was on Facebook Marketplace, but it gave you a link like to the website, and there was a bunch of Sentinels jerseys, not like the star players, but
Mhm.
like the extras in the background jerseys,
Cool.
and they weren't even going for that much. And when I say not that much, like $200 or so.
Yeah.
But for such an iconic movie, I don't think that's bad at all.
Well,
I
this
almost
was
kicked
actually
myself
used
for
on
not
set.
getting one. Yeah, back then anyway. So we went through a lot of not every character. There's a lot of characters in this show, which I appreciate because we've talked about in other reviews where like sometimes they center around like 3-4 players,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all you really see.
Yeah.
I think they do a good job. Yes, there's a kicker. There's plenty of offensive players, plenty of defensive players. The cheerleaders have identities. There's a Shane Falco love interest in this movie. Things like that.
I got to give it credit because that's one of the things in past podcasts I've harped on. Sorry to interrupt, by the way,
No,
but where like even Friday Night Lights, the show, they focused way too much on the offensive players. But you're right, they gave it good balance all across. And with such a small team, because they were replacement players,
I think that helps.
some of them had to play both sides. You'll notice like Danny Bateman, he had to play offense a few times, but he was primarily a defensive player.
Right.
Even Shane, I mean, I know that sometimes the quarterback will do special teams, but not typically.
Yeah.
Because there's risk for injury, and he had to play special teams throughout the game. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a great point.
So where I was actually going with that was a lot of great characters. We mentioned some we didn't. If you had to, who would you say your favorite character is, and if so, do you have a least favorite character?
Oh yeah. So it's a really close tie. Probably Nigel Gruff, but a close second would be Danny Bateman.
Mhm.
I love Danny's craziness. I love how into the sport he is, and just he's always so pumped up and ready to go. But at the same time, he can be stoic and calm in some of the scenes. Like when they first get off the bus, he's just looking
Yeah,
straight.
they're throwing crap. The
Yeah.
real players and fans are throwing crap at their bus and stuff, and he
Yeah.
just. I mean, this
He's-
guy's been to war too, so I guess
Right.
he's not really going to be shaken about that.
I think they said he was in the Gulf War and he lost a kidney in it, and so
And
he's
still snuck back in for another term.
Oh yes, yeah, they did mention that. So kind of Hemingway-ish almost a little bit. Hemingway wanted to get back in, but yeah, no, he's very stoic when he needs to be. So he's a close second. He's really cool, as crazy as he is. But then Nigel, I know I don't typically go for like a laid back character, but I love the whole pub environment. I love that that's
Oh,
his
yeah.
introduction. He's up on a pub bar singing and all that, and he's a soccer player. And he's got so many funny lines throughout the movie, but he's also got some serious shit going on too, some baggage. So I'd say Nigel with a close second of Danny. I'll tell you my least favorite after. I want to hear your favorite.
Okay,
Actually.
so I like Brian Murphy a lot because due to the fact that he can't speak, he's not in a lot of scenes, but almost every scene he's in is memorable.
Hmm.
Like when they have the bar fight,
Yeah.
he writes on the napkin like the best part about being deaf is you can't hear the assholes, right? Um, yeah, you asshole. I don't know if that one is technically correct, but could
It
be.
was very clear though.
Yeah, very clear. He we'll talk later in the movie, right, where he makes a lot of great plays on the field.
Hmm.
Um, when they're dancing in the jail cell, like everybody stops and he keeps going because
He doesn't realize the coach is there,
yeah.
so he's still dancing.
To steal a basketball term, he kind of maximizes his minutes. Like every time he's on screen, it's almost it's pretty
Quality.
memorable.
Yeah.
So I will put him on there for that. I mentioned Clifford Franklin, the wide receiver that can't catch. Like that concept right there is going to be entertaining, right?
Yeah.
And when he starts getting confidence, aka stick him, and he makes catches, he says the cheesiest line I think I've ever heard, and I'm so glad no receiver ever tried to steal this line. Where he said the ball is a one-man cold. I'm the only one catching it. I'm the only one coming down with it, which is probably the lamest thing I've ever heard an athlete say. And no, he's definitely
Is that when he's hitting on the reporter?
Yeah. When he's wearing the skimpiest towel.
Yeah, he keeps referring to himself in third person the entire conversation. But yeah, no, he's funny. At first, he looked so familiar, so I went and looked up his IMDb, and I thought he was in that movie, uh, something under the bed or something like that about a boogeyman.
Okay.
I was like, nah, that's not him. But he was in that Evolution movie, which is
Oh.
like really under the radar kind of stuff, but a good actor. He was funny as hell in this movie. So it's between those two for you?
I would say, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Gruff is extremely likable. Obviously, I don't think Shane Falco gets to be in this conversation because he'd be everybody's favorite. So, yeah, I mean, both of those, Danny Bateman and Gruff, are going to be like, they carry the comedy either together or separately. They kind of carry the comedy through this movie. Now that I think
They do
about
have some good scenes with each other.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to least favorite characters, same thing, kind of a tie. I couldn't decide on just one, but it was between Martell, and Martell is the quarterback for the real team, but he's such a punk in this fucking movie. And my second least favorite would have to be the owner, and it's because he only thinks about it from a business standpoint, and later on in the movie he's fired Gene Hackman in the past. He pushes Falco out to bring Martell back in because Martell crossed the picket line, and he went back on his word. One of the stipulations that Gene Hackman coaches the team is that he has total control over what happens with the team.
Right.
And what happens at the very end is the
Martell
owner
signs and he kicks Falco out.
Yeah, and he has no idea about the inner workings of the team. He doesn't know how that's going to affect team cohesion, how that's not going to work. The other players are not going to like him. He's been fucking with them the entire movie.
Yeah.
They got into a bar fight earlier in the movie. So it's like, yeah, let's put them on the same team now. No, you got one more game to go. Let the replacements finish out their job. So, yeah, I don't like him because of that decision. And then throughout the final game, for the first half, he's just bitching and moaning and everything like that because he's seeing that, I don't know if he actually owns up to his, bad decision making, but it's all going bad in the first half of that last game because of him.
Because everyone else is gelling well, and then you throw this guy in who doesn't know how this guy runs his routes. He doesn't know,
and he's insulting other teammates out there on the field.
Sure.
Including Brian Murphy.
Yeah, who I don't believe even knows is deaf when he's talking to him. Like,
well, he did during the bar scene.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so
that's right.
but then during the second half, Shane comes out, and at first he's the owner's still bitching.
Yeah.
Because he put Shane back in, but then as they start winning, he's all happy and everything like that. But he never gets that moment. I feel like of you fucked up.
Yeah.
You need to own that choice. But Martell is such a punk. I hated him so much. That shows good acting, though.
Yeah. So I was gonna just kind of lead me into it. So in like pro wrestling, right, you have good guys and bad guys.
Yeah.
And if you are a bad guy and people hate you, it's because you did your job well.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like Martell was like a wrestling heel, doing his job well. Like you were supposed to hate him and you do.
Yeah.
So that is very well done. The owner, you felt a little Felt a little betrayed by him. Because when he meets up with McGinty and they're in the golf cart, and he's like, "Hey man, I'm an old man. I'm just trying to win one more.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've had our differences in the past, and now you're the man for the job." And it seems pretty heartwarming, right? And you think, all right, these are two dudes who have been to war together, figuratively on the football field, and they're gonna bring it back in this crazy situation, and and for the most part, he does let him do what he wants for the first
for the most part.
first 3 games. It's until he gets Martell to sign that he kind of turns his back on it.
Well, that's the thing though, is when I was rewatching it, there was a few things in the first conversation that kind of hinted at the type of person that owner was. Because they mentioned that he fired Gene Hackman in the past.
Yep.
In the very beginning.
Because he punched a quarterback, I think is what he alludes to. He
Well-
said, "What do you expect? You went head to head with $1 million quarterback and lost."
Oh well, I don't know if he punched him. Then it probably means you fought.
Maybe.
You know, like on the field, like they
Sure.
had a game.
Mhm.
But which shows that he relies too much on money,
Mhm.
not enough in actual like
Yeah.
coaching and good heart. But one of the things they mentioned almost in the very beginning was Gene Hackman's making him a drink, and he looks up and he's kind of complaining after their last loss, and he goes, says what's wrong, and he says, I'm dying. He says, you've been saying that for 20 years.
Yeah.
So it kind of tells me right off the bat, this guy's a little bit of a
Yeah.
bitcher.
Mhm.
And
I think
then
we all know somebody like that too, whether it be like a grandparent's friend or something. But
just
like,
had nothing
those people
positive
do
to say.
exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just say something positive to
Right.
balance it out. And then when they make the deal in the very beginning, right at the beginning, he says, I want it in writing, because he doesn't trust his verbal
That's true.
agreement
So,
enough.
because again, he's worked for this guy before.
Right.
So
He says, you have my
knows-
word. He goes, I want it in
I
writing.
want it in writing,
Yeah.
yeah.
So those are 3 things that stood out to me in the first conversation where I was like, that guy's not exactly great. He's okay. But yeah, Martell still ends up taking the first
Mhm.
spot. I don't know who the actor is. I've seen him around in other things, but I think he's played bad guys before.
And he
He's-
looks like a prick. Like
Yeah.
he is typecasted. I imagine even if he does like a random like Law and Order episode,
Mhm.
he plays a prick. Like there's no way he doesn't. I don't think.
I want to say he was in Lost.
I can see that.
Yeah, and I think he was a bad guy in that as well.
So it took me a minute to find my least favorite character. Martell, I kind of shied away from because I felt like that was by design. I was
Too
supposed to
obvious.
not like him.
Yeah.
But like he is an evil human. Like it's not it's not like, oh, this is the bad guy, so I'll pick him. Like he has reasons A, B, C, and D why this man is horrible, right?
Even when he gets a second chance, he still fucks it up.
Right. So I'm gonna this is gonna surprise a lot of people, I think, but it's not the character, it's the lack of depth of the character, and it's Earl Wilkinson, the guy they get out of prison, because they
Okay.
give you no background on why is he innocent and you can feel bad for him about that, or is he not? Is he guilty and it's like, I don't feel safe that this dude's in my locker room? Like they could have done so much with that they didn't. And just so everybody knows too, I'm half reviewing Year of the Scab at the same time. There was the backup quarterback on the real Redskins was a guy named Tony Robinson, and they did in fact get him out of jail on a work release program.
Now I noticed in this movie, this watch, I don't know why I didn't notice this before. They changed his name on the field to Smith, so that way he could be undercover. They actually had a whole
Yep.
line about like, oh, there's no history on him.
It
John
just
Madden.
says he's been working in the state of New Jersey or whatever they say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which you're right. And now that you're saying that,
They don't want it to bring bad press or
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah.
Fun fact, and I didn't know this until today. It turns out the actor who plays him, Michael Jace,
yeah.
is in prison for life.
Oh.
As of 2016, he killed his wife or something like that. Sorry to bring this down, but
Talk about a method actor.
I was like, wow, like how many years later, 16 years later, and it kind of came true.
Yeah.
Doesn't get parole for like 40 years.
But yeah, I'm picking him for the lack of like, you could have done so much with that character.
So bad writing, not the character though.
The,
right?
The interpretation of the character
Oh,
makes
okay.
him my least favorite.
I don't
would
know.
say.
Maybe if they wanted the screen or the runtime to run a little bit more, I think they definitely could have added some more in there.
And like when they're at lunch that one time, like
It's one of my favorite
Danny's
scenes.
just across from like
There's
they
Eden.
could have did more with that too, like how he has to like shadow him the whole time.
Well, I love how it was very simple. Like, so this is one of my favorite scenes that he's referencing, and
We're
that's
gonna go to that next.
yeah. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And that's when they are after their first training, they are having lunch in the cafeteria together, and Wilkinson is across the table from Bateman.
Yeah.
So you've got a cop and a convict right across from each other, and who's the guy who can't?
I just had it written down. Clifford Franklin.
Clifford Franklin, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's in between them, and he
And he
recognizes.
notices him because he played
Right.
in the pros at one point for Minnesota, apparently.
Yeah, he recognizes Wilkinson, and he's
Yeah.
talking to him. He says, I bet he didn't even do it or anything like that.
I
Which is
better not see it. I will cop that. You gonna see that?
yeah. And so like Bateman is just kind of nodding and smirking a little bit, and then he just kind of goes, "I'm a cop." And so Franklin leaves after a second of awkwardness. It's really funny. But then you just get a scene of
you're glossing over the best part.
what?
The best way to leave a conversation is going, "Ooh, look, bunt cake."
Oh
And he
yeah.
just gets up.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get like another few seconds of the two of them just sitting there, stoic while eating, staring right at each other. And that's actually one of my favorite scenes is just them,
Yep.
they're not even in opposition exactly, but they kind of painted it that way.
Yet again, you could have done so much more with that.
Right.
Is the way I look at it.
They
So
did
it's not the guy's fault. I just feel like
the writing maybe.
he could have been
yeah.
one of the more interesting characters, and
Yeah.
he's one of the less fleshed out characters. I'd say.
Yeah, they gave a little bit more to him. I think enough to maybe satisfy you a little bit, and that's during the fierce scene, which is one of the best scenes of the movie. I think.
Yep.
Another great scene.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up in the best scenes for sure.
He mentions that's one of his fears is going back to prison,
Yep.
and then near the end of the movie, they're both on offense, him and Bateman, and
Yep.
they are kind of working together now.
Yeah,
and he's like, "Give the ball to
Bateman's
Wilkinson."
fullback, Wilkinson's a running back. So
Yeah.
give him to him. He's going to prison.
He's like, "Get behind me, I'll cover you," and
that's a great scene and great line. Too,
yeah,
for
because
sure.
now they're bonding, as teammates should, no matter what your background is. And so yeah, those are that's all they really did though.
Yeah.
You're right, they could have fleshed it out a lot more, but at least they did. There's that.
There's pieces of it. It's like if you could. There's piece 1, 3, and 5. Just give me 2 and 4, and then we got something.
Exactly. Yeah. He
so-
did have that one funny scene when he first gets there.
Yeah, he wants to steal the watch from
Yeah,
the guy.
that's a nice watch. Well, it's broken. It only works twice a day. Can we go closer to where everyone else is?
Out of screaming distance.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was gonna parlay that right into favorite and least favorite scenes.
Mhm.
I had the fear scene in
Yeah.
there. It starts funny because they're talking about insects and
Yes,
and stuff.
spiders on the field.
and even when Shane brings up quicksand, at first he's like, "Oh, yeah, that's a scary mother, man. Like,
Getting all that
the
muck in your
sand
mouth.
and you can't breathe." Like any of these people have ever interacted with quicksand in their life,
Right,
like,
exactly.
Like he's talking from personal experience.
I thought that was going to be such a big thing earlier in life, when we were reading like Goosebumps books and stuff.
And it's not even that. Even if you do encounter quicksand, it is not like it is in the cartoons. Like unless you
right,
have a heart attack,
you're diving down into it.
you're gonna be fine. You just have to walk out with any level of urgency, and you're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
We're actually gonna take a really quick break, and then we will come back with our favorite scenes,
Okay.
favorite and least favorite. Okay, we're back after a quick break. Favorite and least favorite scenes is where we're gonna go next. We kind of mentioned for a favorite scene, we both kind of mentioned it before we even got to this, the fear scene.
Mm-hmm.
What are you most afraid of? It goes from a variety of insects to quicksand to what quicksand really means, and it is really one of the first bonding moments for the team. It's when they all really reflect like the crazy situation that they're in. That they all came from the mini mart, the airport, prison.
Yeah.
It's the moment they realize they're, as crazy as this situation is, they're all in it together.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, it's a very powerful scene.
I love what you said earlier about them kind of being an island of misfits,
Mhm.
because they make it work despite like their crazy different backgrounds. But yeah, I'd say that's probably the most important scene in the movie is the fear scene. And it's a good it goes to show how mental sports can be, because that's not taking place on the field. That's taking place together in the back, in front of the whiteboard and all that. And it goes to show how important communication is with your team, because Martell didn't take place in that.
Right.
If he had, maybe he'd look at things a little bit different. But it goes to show that
if he allowed himself to
open up a little bit,
yeah, exactly.
Because what is it? The two strongest emotions that humans can feel is love on one side of the spectrum and fear on the other.
Yep.
And admitting your fears, like especially on the field,
Mhm.
something that they all have to face together.
Right.
That's very important. And I love that. Like we were saying earlier, in the beginning, it's all a joke. But then as soon as Shane says quicksand and they joke a little bit more about it, Gene Hackman, the coach, he's like, no, that's not what he meant. Yeah. Oh, yeah. As a coach, he should, and so he goes, no, that's not what he meant. And so, Shane explains it's when, one thing goes wrong during a game and then the next thing goes wrong and the next thing goes wrong. And no matter how much you fight it, it just, you can't seem to get out of the situation that you're in, and you're in over your head. And it's a really fantastic scene. I think from there, things really picked up for the team. They've done, okay leading up to it. They had a few good bonding moments. One of my favorite little scenes they had in the first game was they're not playing well together at all. And the first thing that they do as a team, Gene Hackman says successfully, is stayed in a huddle and moved the huddle away from all the puke that was on the ground because
Right.
two of them had puked. And so it's really funny. But Gene Hackman off to the side goes, it's the first thing they've done successfully as a team. They also had the jail cell team, the scene where they are all dancing together, and that's one of those moments where they got put in jail because of a bar fight where they were fighting the original team members, and that's something they did as a team. And then in the jail cell they bonded a bit more, and they
Could argue that was their first win as a team because they did seem to get the better of the.
Oh, yeah.
They definitely had more fight in them than the Millionaires, you know.
Yep. So yeah, I'd say my personal favorite scene, the cheerleading distraction scene.
Fair.
Fantastic. But no, I mean, the fear scene is probably the most important one in the film, in my opinion. I do love that quick little scene between Bateman and Wilkinson and their progress throughout the movie, their little scenes together. But yeah, I'd say the fear scene is probably the best.
I'm glad you brought up the cheerleaders because I feel like if you didn't, like, this movie, the love interest angle, which we'll get into in a minute, it's not needed. Like, this is the exact same movie without that love interest, but it's the 2000s. Everything had to have a love interest, and there's nothing wrong with it. But it's just kind of like, if that's what they put in instead of Earl Wilkinson's backstory, then I'm upset, you know. But we'll talk more. Like, I didn't hate the love triangle, not triangle, but like the love interest in this. But it wasn't necessary, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You already mentioned another, favorite part was the dancing in the jail cell to "I Will Survive," right?
Yeah.
And they kind of set it up early in the bar fight scene. Franklin puts money in the jukebox, and that's just what comes on.
Yeah.
And the guards, the twins, they don't like it. They're like, "Oh, who played this shit?" He's like, "I just put a dime in the jukebox and it came on," right?
Yeah.
So they almost like
it's foreshadowing.
They foreshadowed it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they're in there, and then like, so normally what I want to do, another topic I'm going to put in these is like, what scene is this movie most known for? And I think it's that scene, like for the
jail cell.
Yeah.
For
the casual moviegoer, I think them dancing in the jail cell is what this movie's most known for.
Oh yeah, I mean, I Will Survive was already famous as it was, but this boosted it even more. I love how he introduces it in the jail cell because they're all talking about like how they were kicking ass during the fight. Franklin, he was hiding behind the jukebox, and so they start kind of bashing him for it, and he goes, "Well, at first I was afraid."
I was petrified. Yeah. And Falco, like, nobody's ever used the word petrified in a real human conversation. Petrified. So you were petrified?
Yeah, like little disbelieving. Yeah. But then as he continues on, they realize he's singing the song. I hate this damn song. But they start doing the electric slide. Yeah.
And it's funny that's like, because he said, "I know you know that," and like even the deaf kid knew the electric slide.
Oh yeah, it's such a commonly known dance, and I'm saying that as someone who hates dancing, or right. I dance by myself, but nobody can see that.
Right.
There'd be eyes bleeding and everything, popping. But yeah, no, I'd say that's the most well-known scene, for sure. And then so favorite scene, cheerleader distraction tied with the fear scene. Most well-known scene would be the jail cell scene.
My I'll throw one more in there before we get to least favorite scenes, and it's it's not necessary. It's the same movie without this scene, but I always chuckle at it. It's when he's in the bar with the love interest, which we're about to get to, and he's gonna leave, and she's like, "Oh, okay," and you get the John Madden commentary.
He's coming. Like, he starts walking back, and he's hesitant because he's about to go in for a kiss.
Yeah.
And so the John Madden commentary comes on like,
Falco's been shut down by this defense all day. He's looking for an opening, and then it.
What do you think he should do? Yeah, you should go for it.
And then it transitions into like a touchdown run by him.
Right.
And like that part's just funny to me.
So yes.
That's one of those.
It was very creative.
Yeah, it was very creative, and like.
And by the way, love that John Madden was in the movie. Like
absolutely.
Especially, and it's a very fitting movie, especially after what happened recently with him passing away.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that.
Him again,
yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny, like this is a movie we talked about earlier. Did not have any NFL licensing at all,
Yeah.
but got the voice of the NFL somehow.
Mhm.
Don't know how that happened, but no,
And even got some of his jokes, throughout the
He
commentating
got
and
the
all that.
TriCaster writing on it.
Oh yeah, he's all over this.
Fumbled. Oh no, he dropped it here, boom, and then whap, and all
So
that
Falco
stuff.
throws the ball into the back of one of his own teammates. Doink!
Yeah.
I was like, when he said doink, I just lost it. I don't know why, but it was so funny. When the fat guy makes a touchdown, he goes, "I love when a fat guy makes a touchdown because then you get a fat guy spike and then a fat guy dance."
That's another great one because like those moments happen rarely where like on the tip pass he catches it and he might run for like 10 yards, but
Mhm.
to score on that,
Yeah.
that is and the moment of catching it and the holy shit like that, that's definitely that's my favorite scene as well.
I found out, how the Asian, he has, or the Japanese guy, he has a thing he says,
Dandiskan.
Dandiskan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked up on like IMDb trivia what that means, and it's
Uh-huh.
like, what the hell is this, or something like that. So
Right.
they don't. I don't know. It was just kind of funny,
Yeah.
little tidbit. So least favorite
Least
scene.
favorites. Yeah.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Uh,
You're not gonna like mine, so you should go first.
okay.
Yeah.
Was it something that I do like?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh man. So actually, on the flip side of the cheerleader distraction scene, my least favorite is the dancing montage
The
scene.
tryout scene.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
like tryout scenes in general.
I like the song they use.
The
But I don't
song
like
is fine.
But I
Yeah,
don't. Yeah, you're right.
it was just so typical. I don't know, and it's just like, who's actually going to these tryouts with a knife in their boot and saying, just
Yeah.
rhyming the most random shit.
Mhm.
And the one woman who's doing the robot as her dance. I don't know. I know it was meant for comedy
It was
purposes.
meant to be cringy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's meant to be cringy and it's meant to be funny and all that. I don't know why. I'm just not a big fan of those scenes. That's just a personal thing, I think.
Montages in general.
No, montages are fine, but they've got to be done the right way.
So I think you said tryout montages.
Tryout montages in general seem to be kind of it's some can be good,
Sure.
and then this one, no, I didn't like it.
I didn't think of that, but I totally agree with you.
It's
So
just
honestly,
a
I
waste
think
of screen time.
I think I've blocked that scene out of my head, so that's the only reason I didn't think of it.
As soon as I hear that guitar strum from the
Right.
song, I'm like, I just want to start fucking fast forwarding through this scene.
sure.
You know?
Do you have any others, or is that your heading away?
I think the rest were really good. I'm curious though what yours is because I'm not sure now.
So mine is actually, so I'm watching the movie and like I knew I wanted to do favorite scene and least favorite scene, and going into it I'm like, I love this movie. I don't know that I have a least favorite
Yeah,
scene.
the
right?
rest were fine.
Maybe I almost went with like the game they lose on the 1 yard line because it was like heartbreaking, right? But it didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because by the end of it they played well as a team and they knew they were going to build on that, and then they rattle off 3 straight.
Mhm.
So what it actually is, and it's easily fixable, which is why I don't like it. When Shane Falco goes from sitting on his boat to running out at halftime of the last game.
He shows up in the locker room, but yeah, like
No, but he goes from watching the game on TV to on his boat, on his little 8-inch television that he probably has to crank up, I assume.
Yeah.
And because here's the thing, here's how you fix that. You bring in Martell. Everybody hates Martell. He starts. Falco's still on the team. He's still part of the roster. You have him sit on the bench and you have him watch the team fall apart. And then it's that much more captivating. And then you have that same scene in the locker room. And then you have him come out, you have him put his helmet on and run on the field, and you still get that big crowd pop.
Mm-hmm.
The fact, because here's the thing, you have to be like on an official roster to play in an NFL game. I know we're in a strike season, but
So it's unprecedented.
I would assume he's not on the roster anymore. I would assume like when they hand it in to the official before the game.
It's like, how did he get back there?
Yeah, he's not.
That's
listed.
a good point. I never thought about it that way.
So the reason I don't like it is because it's that easy. You make
Plus,
him,
unless he lives down the street, how far away?
no, I'm
like,
not
did
even doubting that he could get there because everyone's already at the game. There's no traffic. You're good.
Still, yeah, I guess so.
I'm not doubting him getting there. I'm doubting the fact that he should have been legally allowed to play, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because, again, if you make him be there and sit on the sideline as the backup,
Mm-hmm.
and then you make him see all the, like, mishaps that are happening, like, you don't know that you can, Brian's deaf and you got to, whatever. I think that makes that scene, that makes it even more harder to watch them fall apart, and even better that he's back on the field.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's literally on his houseboat to running out of the tunnel, they wouldn't even have his jersey ready.
Well, he did show up while they were in the locker room.
Yeah.
but you're right. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, he did have time to suit up, but it's
No,
I
but
guess
they wouldn't have a number 16 jersey with Falco on the back of it still sitting ready to go.
that's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know. I guess they did it for dramatic effect. You know, it's
Again, you can do all that same stuff if you don't have him leave the team and you have him. You're the backup quarterback now. I think he even says the starter. He's a 2-time Super Bowl winner. Like you're now you still need a backup quarterback.
yeah, just in case you get injured or anything like that.
And based on everything we've seen in this movie, excuse me, there's not another quarterback on the roster.
Right.
Like literally, when they line up the first time and hike the ball, it falls on the ground.
Mhm.
They didn't even have somebody behind center. So as far as we know, they had no other quarterbacks. So that's my biggest issue with the scene.
It's a good point.
Easily correctable is my biggest issue with that.
That's true. All right, I can agree with you there. That's a
because you mentioned like way earlier how much you like that scene. I'm like, oh, I'm about to bring that down.
What, that scene?
Just him coming back and rallying the team at the end and everything.
I don't think I mentioned that.
Maybe it was on the first take. We did have one mishap, so maybe it was in that one. So as we get into kind of towards the end of this, we will bring up the love interest, the head cheerleader. Am I to believe that the cheerleaders are also on strike? Is that the issue here?
Yeah, I thought that was weird.
Right.
Because I noticed that too. And she seems to be the only professional one, and then has to kind of like re-recruit. So it's like they're going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they, unless I missed it, I don't think they said anything about that. You're just meant to assume that, okay, that's the same thing is going on there.
And then they bring in, strippers, which lead to, your favorite scene, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
One of the blonde chick looks like Ty Conti, the wrestler. I know you don't know who that is, but some people on this channel might. Which, obviously, there's a 15-year gap between this active wrestler and this actress. But whenever I see that now, that's who I think of, and vice versa when I see her wrestle. But so as far as the love interest goes, I don't hate it. A lot of these movies give you a love interest because they feel like they have to. It's a very organic, she loves the game. Shane is everything in her mind a quarterback isn't, because they're all pretty boys and prima donnas and don't care about their teammates. And
she calls them babies quite a bit, you know. One thing I gotta give her credit for that I did like, and this kind of reminded me of the love interest in Invincible, and that's that she is pretty knowledgeable about what's going on, and not only with their team, but she's also knowledgeable of what's going on with the other teams because she has contacts. And so on their drive back in the Jeep, she does mention like, okay, well, this person's going through a divorce, so his snap is going to be a few seconds off because he's been hung over the and then
while she's driving
crazy. But she knows some stuff that's going on, and that could be useful. The sad thing is she only gives that information, or they only show her give the information for the first game coming up, which they lose anyway. And then she gives no information about the second, third, or fourth game, and they win all of those. And it's like, that would have been nice to have her play a bigger plot point, like besides just the romantic interest.
I normally hate the I'm a female that likes football and I have to hit you over the head with the fact that I know football, and they become like an encyclopedia, like in Invincible with the whole Sam Huff, All-American linebacker, 3 years in a row, blah blah blah. But with this, and I feel bad that we're not remembering her name, either her name in the movie or the actress's name, but
Elizabeth Banks. Anyway,
that's why he's on the show.
Took a second. Sometimes I blank though.
But so she's not young, she's not old, but I think in cheerleader terms, she's kind of older, right?
Yeah.
She's probably been around the game for a long time. Her dad owned the bar that she now owns. Took her to games. Very knowledgeable. And the fact she's been not only around the game as a fan, but she kind of works for the team.
Yeah, she's on the field and all that.
She's on the sideline.
She has a genuine interest.
Her ability to know what's going on is totally justified.
Yeah.
Like if you are a PR director for an NFL team, you might not love football. It might not be what you get out of bed for everyone, but you're going to know things going on in the world of the NFL.
And like I said, her knowing what's going on with other teams as well. That's invaluable knowledge.
She's going to gossip with their cheerleaders and blah, blah, blah. And I love how she threw in the we only make $50 a game, so I got to make
she's a hard worker.
Yeah. So,
but it was very, everything that involved her though, and this is not the actress's fault. It's not the character's fault. It's just the music that played whenever she was on screen or her and Falco had a scene is very 90s, or because we know the 90s continued through 2004 basically. Yeah. So it was just.
I always put it, and I heard this in a podcast recently. The 90s is from the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is actually in '89, to at least 9/11, which is '01.
Yeah,
That's
and
what the
and I would
trend
say
is.
even further.
You're
I'd
probably
all
right,
the
but
way
that's
through
a
like
good-
03 or
That's a good threshold to have.
Oh yeah, and so the '90s had a certain vibe, especially musically, and this with her again, not and it's not even necessarily a bad thing. It's just that 22 years later, you watch it, and that's the vibe you get every time she's on screen, and so yeah, not her fault. I mean, she did great, and it's not even a bad thing. Like I said, it's just a certain vibe that from that era of films.
So as we get into, as we said, they lose the first game and they rattle off 3 straight. And they're in the real story, they only get to play 3 games and they win all 3.
Mhm.
So they kind of just gave you that learning moment in the movie that wasn't there in real life. They go to play Dallas, which they claim in the movie the entire team has crossed the picket line. You're going to play the defending world champions. Which,
Oh yeah.
which isn't totally inaccurate. In reality, what happens is 11 players cross, and a lot of them are the star players.
Okay.
Like Danny White, the quarterback, Tony Dorsett, the running back, Drew Pearson, the wide receiver, and these are star players that won the Super Bowl the year before.
Mhm.
So like it wasn't a big stretch, but it's much easier to say the defending world champion, you're playing them as opposed to these 11 star players, right? So they end up playing that team, and the one thing, obviously, they don't waste screen time on the other teams, but in reality, yes, these players crossed the picket line because they were tired of missing paychecks, but they weren't at the gym while they were on strike. They were hanging out, partying with the other guys that are now on the other end of the line. They came back, and yes, they're Super Bowl caliber talent, but they're also very rusty. And in these interviews in the year of the Scab, they explain like, would we have beaten the true defending world champions? Probably not, but we've been gelling for 3 weeks and they've been on the couch.
Yeah.
And that's what it came down to.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, muscle atrophy starts taking place pretty quick after you stop your routine or anything like that. So, especially when you start ingesting, alcohol or anything else like that, So, absolutely, 3 weeks out of practice, especially when you're used to it, in a regular season all the time.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good point.
Which leads me to one of the biggest questions I'll always ask when you review a sports movie: how was the sport portrayed? How were the football scenes in this movie? I feel like they're done rather well.
For the most part,
I think they're better than most.
There's a quite a bit of luck, and they even, like Falco mentioned it, where sometimes they get a little too lucky. Better luck than good, or better lucky than good, is what he says to Coach. One thing I know it's meant for comedy, and it was funny, is the whole sticky hands thing. It's been done before.
I mean, that's a real thing. They obviously exaggerate it.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I mean it's got to be one of the funniest lines in the movie, because they put all the shit on Franklin's hand. He goes, "Coach, it looks like I jacked off an elephant," and it is. His hands are oozing with this
like
substance.
He's lined up, and they do the close up on him, and he sticks his hands up, and it looks like someone dumped Elmer's glue on his hands and then it dried.
It looks really bad.
But the worst part, because like the first one,
but it's just so overdone,
The first catch he makes with the glue, like it's a normal catch with your hands. The second one, somehow he still drops and catches in his knees, and like, oh yeah, fine, that's a touchdown. It's like, no, he's got to like possess that shit.
Yeah.
But so that was.
So I mean, overall,
stick them aside, I felt the football scenes were rather.
Oh no, I'd say overall, yes, I agree. I if I had to grade it, I'd say at least a 90%. There's like a couple lucky plays they get, which it's by design. It's meant for story purposes. But would it actually work out that way? Where he pelts the guy in the head and it pops up, and lineman gets it and then runs it all the way in with 3 people on his back,
right.
with the coach yelling, climb on his back. Wouldn't they go for? I mean, I'm
go
not.
For your knees,
that's what I thought. Yeah, go for the knees. Go for the center of mass at least.
Which,
hips.
By the way, that same coach, that's the New York Knights coach. That's the one. That's the same one with the cheerleader scene.
Right.
And an underrated scene is him yelling at the ref, like, "Come on, you can't call that. The girl slapped the other girl on the ass," which is a conversation that would probably never happen.
Oh yeah. It was that whole scene was great, but yeah, like that play. And then the other lucky play.
But the regular football scenes.
The regular stuff, yes, they were fine. Like I said, if I had to take every scene every football play throughout the movie and grade all of it as 1. I'd say at the very minimum 90%.
So to me, a 10 out of 10 is Friday Night Lights. It's simplified because it's high school,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's actually, but they make it accurate too, because it's like their level is
But
supposed
they
to be.
explain to you what's happening and why it works or why it doesn't work. And to me, Friday Night Lights is the best representation of football in a movie. So if that's a 10, I agree. This is like an 8.5 or a 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, but they do have some great lines throughout the movie. I mean, not just comedy ones like the jacking off an elephant one, or I'll kick the bloody piss out of it. The thing is, I wrote down here, like, for each game, some of my favorite stuff, and a lot of it came down to the lines. One thing I didn't write down, but it still stuck with me, has got to be one of the most motivational lines, and it's from the coach. And they come out for the second half, and he goes, one thing that the other team has done wrong is they've underestimated you, and they don't fear you. And it's funny because it brings it back to the fear conversation from before. And he goes, for them, they're going to go on tomorrow, and they're going to, they're going to continue training, and they're going to go on with their season and all that. But for you guys, because it's their last game as replacement, there is no tomorrow. There is just today.
And that makes you very dangerous.
It makes you very dangerous people. And I thought, like, I get chills just kind of hearing it in my head again.
And then they just bull rush out of the tunnel.
Oh yeah, and then right after. So one of the funny things though is their first play back from halftime is to just all out brawl with the other team, and they just like start beating up on them and everything like that.
Very longest yard.
Oh yeah,
it's a prerequisite of longest yard.
Misfits, So then they have to go back like 60 yards or something like that, because everyone gets penalized. Speaking of which, there was a play earlier, the cheerleader distraction scene when the offense false starts.
And he has to call every single one of them.
Oh, yeah. When he's calling out every single number that false started, oh my gosh, that was so funny.
That reminds me of in my short, playing days, I was a center, and, we try to get the other team off sides, and, we did a hard count, and everybody jumped, and, we snapped the ball, got a big play or whatever, and the ref threw the flag, and he said, and it's not like, he didn't have a microphone, so you have to be within distance of the guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, false start, and the other guy, or the other guys are offsides. And everyone's like, on who? And he turned around to the other team and said, everybody, which I thought would have almost been funnier, like, offside, false start on everybody. But it really brings home the fact when you have to rattle off 5 jerseys.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
It's one of those things. I don't know if I knew that or heard it 10 years ago or 12 years ago when I was watching it back in high school, but this time I'm listening through, and it's just like number after number after number. He's listing the entire offensive line, quarterback.
He doesn't have to do, honestly. He could just say offsides on the defense, but again, you just want to drive the point home.
Yeah.
Real quick, because I don't want this scene to get lost. I could probably go back to favorite scenes with this. It's when Coach and Danny have I need you to get me the ball. You need the ball.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then he runs up and he just rips the ball at it in a way that doesn't happen as much as you would think it would.
Yeah.
And then they get back in there. I got you the ball. You got me the ball. And then the whistle goes off and he shuts them both up. And he goes, "Go sit down now."
Yeah, because they both are just staring at the field. That's one of those things. As much as I like Danny and he shows throughout different points in the movie, he's actually somewhat intelligent, but that scene right there, he's very doggish, like a dog that just fetched and is very happy to bring it back. Yeah, probably. Yeah, it kind of makes sense since he's a cop and was a soldier and all that. Not saying that they're dumb, but he's good at his role. He's a meathead. He's a meathead, yeah. Yeah, and it's not like, oh yeah, but no, that's definitely, it's one of the lines that I loved. In the first game, Nigel, they're asking him to go kick, and he gives the cigarette to the coach hold this, and the coach is like, he realizes it's a cigarette, and right before that, Gene Hackman, the head coach, is telling him, right before he goes out to kick, he stops and goes, the ball goes over the bar, not under the bar, because he's a soccer player, so they're used to it going. You remember back in like Lasso, they kick he kicks over the goal. This is during the skits, not the show. And he yells out, "Oh, field goal!" And they're like, "No points, no points." Let's see. One thing I love about Bateman. This was in the second game. He's running on special teams. He has the ball, and they're all telling him to stop running, go down, so that we can stop the clock. Right? They're like, "Stop the clock," but motherfucker doesn't stop or anything like that, which I love. So Shane,
like trucking people, like he's making progress. He's just doing it too
Yes, and so Shane tackles him himself.
Yeah.
And instead of being upset about it or anything like that, Bateman's like, "Nice hit, Shane. Nice hit." He just compliments him. He's one of those guys. Because again, these local gangsters are. Yeah, I think you're right. They were going to take his pup. Well, the thing is, they sound almost like they're from like Boston or something like that. I think he just ran into some bad American. Well, the thing is, he doesn't make the best choices financially, at least. You know, he pissed it all away in the track, all his money. So he had the money to pay him back, and he pisses it all away at the racetrack, the dog track, and yeah. But I think you're right. He did say something about they're going to take the pub, but you know they could still physically fuck him up and mess with him and all that. And so,
But honestly, he like the fact that he mentioned that, it's like he's more worried about his pub.
that's true.
Which I respect.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I could run a pub with a wheelchair. It's just a matter of owning a pub.
The thing is with gangsters, depending on what kind of gangs we're talking, if we're talking about mafia, it's walking away with your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so anyway, at the very end though, like they're at the game and he's going through this bad mental stuff and he ends up breaking his arm during that play. And he's telling Falco that he saved him and they win and then they all start dancing and Gene Hackman has a few more lines to like finish the movie and then that's it. And I'm like, what happened with Nigel and that whole story? Like, is his pub going to get taken away? Is he going to die after the game? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm looking too far into it, but I mean, it's not exactly. If I'm going to go ahead and assume what is most realistically going to happen, it's not a happy ending for everybody. It's a happy ending for the team in general. But then again, I guess that's kind of the realism of life. Wilkinson probably had to go back to jail.
Yep.
Nigel either lost his pub or died, or maybe he got paid enough where he could pay them off then.
Well, I have some theories.
So I'm guessing they bet money on him either not making or missing kicks. So by faking the field goal, that takes him out of the equation.
Okay.
So that is my probably the more likely theory.
Okay.
My second theory that I like a whole lot more is you get a spin-off movie of the guards, the twins, protecting Nigel in his pub from these gangsters, and you get like a buddy cop movie out of these guys. That I would love to see that as well. But because you're right. He goes and he tells Shane, like, you saved me. I think because whatever they bet on was something about him making or missing a kick. So if the kick never gets even attempted, no money is lost.
So okay, that makes sense.
That is my thought.
I mean, unless they mentioned it and it just maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention.
I've seen it enough to when you brought that up, I'm like, that's a valid point.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then there's the other theory we were talking about earlier, where that broken arm eventually falls off, and then he goes into science and he starts working for Oscorp, and he tries to regenerate the arm, but then he turns into the Lizard and has to fight Spider-Man.
I would have never realized that was that person until you brought it up.
Well, he's much. I don't want to say he's heavy in the Spider-Man movies, but he's like, I don't know. He seems heavier, taller, thicker set. I mean, it was also a 12-year difference, but yeah, he seemed very wiry muscle. No, I'll say this: I never recognized until when I rewatched it and I saw the name pop up. I was like, I only know that guy from one thing. You know, that's a very notable name at this point, Rhys Ifans.
So towards the end of this, on the rewatch, you know, like there's a really good quote to this movie though. Like if you watch this movie, there's one quote. There's T-shirts made of this quote. I'll bring it up in a minute. It's what's known from this movie. But rewatching it this time, the ending. You mentioned Gene Hackman says some stuff, and then the movie ends.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of glossed over it before, but that monologue of Gene Hackman after the game, you know, quick rewind. Like in the first game, they say winners always want the ball in their hands with the game on the line, and Shane audibles from a pass play to a run play, they lose the game.
Yeah.
So they get in the huddle after that offside or after that holding call on the fake field goal. And so we got to win on this play. Who wants the ball in their hands? Brian Murphy says, me. It's like, yeah, Brian, you want it. Let's link up. And they do it, and he throws the game-winning touchdown. You know, all fun is had by the babyface team, you know, and they win the game. And then it goes into the Gene Hackman monologue. And I knew that he said some stuff, but I did not realize that it was a goosebumps moment. That's something I like to call like when you really
Okay.
take in a movie.
So it kind of for me, I guess it kind of glazed over.
and it did
Or-
for me the first time I watched it. So
Okay.
if you don't mind,
Now I
I'm
gotta
gonna
go-
read that quote for you. If you don't mind.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm
All
probably gonna pull it up as soon as I get home.
All right. So the replacement players from the Washington Sentinels left the stadium that day. There was no ticker tape parade, no endorsement deals over sneakers or soda pop. I love that he called it soda pop and not just soda, or breakfast cereal. Just a locker to be cleaned out and a ride home to catch. But what they didn't know was that their lives will be changed forever because they had been part of something great. And greatness, no matter how brief, stays with a man. Every athlete dreams of a second chance, but these men lived it. And I never realized how deep of a monologue that actually was until I rewatched it this time for this podcast.
Heck
And
yeah.
to me, that's a goosebumps moment.
It
Like,
is.
It's very true.
Oh, I felt it up here.
Yeah, I did that. And it's definitely a great line, and it's during the and the people that kind of link up. You know, Shane's hugging everybody. Bateman and Wilkinson, the cop and the inmate shake hands, right?
Yeah.
Um,
The guards come up on either side of Shane, which looks really cool,
Yeah.
by the way.
Gruff and the sumo wrestler who had bumped heads throughout the movie.
Yeah.
They have their moment, and just a great movie. Like we really in our episode that I had you on between season 1 and season 2, we talked about the lack of good sports movies
Mhm.
in modern day. This is like a shining light.
And
Like, if we get anything close to this in the future, I'll be a very happy man.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, what's nice is based on the true story. That again, there's some differences. It was played at a different time of the season. They only played 3 games. The thing is, that year in real life, the Washington Redskins went on to win the Super Bowl. Those replacements during those 3 games, even though they won all 3, and a lot of people agree that those games were integral to them getting to the playoffs and winning that year, the Super Bowl. Those players did not get a Super Bowl ring until 2018. And so when was this? 87?
86, 87 season.
Okay, 86, 87. So it took,
30 years.
30 years for them to finally get recognized. And I think it's
So
I could be wrong, but I think cinema makes a difference. Life imitating art imitating life and all that. And I think that art can sometimes make a big difference in real life stuff. And I think movies like this, granted it came out 18 years before they got awarded the Super Bowl rings, but you're not telling me it made a little bit of a difference.
Well, honestly, I think
that-
it was a very important first step, because you had this movie come out in 2000, which then led to the 30 for 30 being made in 2017.
Mhm.
And then a year after the year of the scab, they get the rings.
Yeah.
And in that in the year of the scab, which again, like, I can't stress enough, if you love this movie, if you love the premise of this movie, definitely go back and watch it. One of the offensive linemen mentions that immediately after the Super Bowl, one of the equipment managers got replicas made. So they weren't given to them by the NFL, but he took it upon himself to get them.
That's
and
cool.
the player, he's had that one forever too. And he looked at it, and in the documentary, and he shows it to the camera, and goes, "I love it and I hate it," which is kind of the premise of everything we went through.
Yeah.
And it's pretty crazy. So the fact that, if this happened today, which I don't know that we would play game, like the base MLB just had a strike that ended before. We didn't have replacement baseball players, right?
Mhm.
Just to give this a little context, but like, if we ever lived a situation again where replacement players played in the NFL, I don't know that we would. I honestly don't think it would ever happen again.
You think the team would just shut down for that season?
I think we would just not play games until a new CBA was made.
Especially after what happened with COVID, because they did just cancel games when they
and
need
stuff.
to.
So, but I think if that were to happen again, for somehow those players would get rings. Granted, some of that is because teams make that much more money now, because a lot of the NFL sends you X amount of dollars to get your team championship rings.
Mhm.
So to get 30 extra championship rings made wasn't in the budget. That's what they say in the documentary at the time. And Joe Gibbs, who owned the team then and now, that's what he said. He said at the time it was a matter of money. I don't think it would be a matter of money today. So if it happened now, I don't think we'd have an issue. I think the fact that it happened in the 80s, when, granted, football made plenty of money.
I was going to say
it was a millionaire business. Now it's a billionaire business. And I think
Right.
that's the difference.
Well, there's that, but it also took 30 years.
Yeah.
It could have been done in the next year or two, if they had really cared. I think that enough publicity and attention was brought to it between the movie and, like you said, the documentary especially, where I think and maybe they only did it as a publicity thing of look how good we are, you know.
Again, this happened 30 years later.
Yeah,
This
yeah, it
when
is 30 years later.
The
That's
now
the
Washington Commanders. You know, it was a year or two before they got rid of the Redskins name.
yeah.
So it might have been something. You know, we're about to play
Let's
the first.
balance it out a little.
We're about
bit.
to play the first year in the NFL of the Washington Commanders. We went 2 years as just the Washington football team.
Yeah.
And you know, it's definitely interesting to see how that all shook out. And again, this happened in 2018 because the documentary happened in 2017. And luckily, in the documentary, they mentioned like 13 months after this documentary was made, they finally.
So they went back in and edited.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
day.
good. I'm
Yeah.
glad that they did.
So,
but
I mentioned to you that you're gonna want to watch this. Now you're definitely gonna.
Yeah,
wanna
I
watch
still
this,
haven't seen. Yeah, I have not seen that documentary
Years,
yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, the whole reason I brought it up was because of that. What I mean, like I said, when I was watching it, I guess I kind of glazed over. But those ending quotes from Gene Hackman,
Mhm.
I think those are important, and it kind of, you know, granted at the time, yes, you're right, they just went home, you know, they cleaned out their lockers and that was it. But at least there's some, I don't know, some reprieve in knowing 30 years later. So whoever maybe not, they're not all still alive.
Yeah.
So some of them never got it.
Yeah, I mean,
You
to
know,
my knowledge,
maybe.
It's
I don't
a
know.
very good percentage. I don't think
Yeah, I would hope so.
that's not a big part of the story. I'm sure there is at least one. Like there's, you know,
Yeah.
mathematically speaking. Another quick note to mention: the Grover Franklin character is based on the replacement scab Anthony Allen, who
Clifford
Franklin,
Franklin.
the so he's the wide receiver. In the first game they play as replacement players, he actually breaks the Redskins record for receiving yards in a game, which gave and you know, in the movie they lost, in the real life they won, and they didn't know what to think because like he's a replacement player playing against replacement players, and he now has a record.
Right.
And when
Can we count it?
Yeah, and when the players came back, he's one of 3. I believe there was 3. I could be wrong, but it was definitely under 5. 5 players that even when the regular players came back, they kept on the roster. So Anthony Allen was on the team. He played in the NFC Championship game. He caught 1 pass for a first down. And again, this is all in the documentary. He did not play in the Super Bowl. He dressed, he sat on the sideline, didn't record any stats. So he's the only replacement player that I'm aware of that got a ring on time. So he's one guy to bring up for sure.
Interesting.
And he has, to my knowledge, also never really, he very much led the charge of these other players getting the ring. So
good.
Yeah, very
good.
Very
That's
cool.
very admirable.
Yeah. So in a team that, you know, modern day has to change its name, has an owner that's not loved by society, it's a really cool. It's a weird time in history that I think we will. Again, I don't think we'll ever have that moment again. We will have lockouts. We just had a baseball lockout. We'll have another football lockout. We might even lose games that we've had NBA lockouts. I don't think we'll ever see. The closest thing we will see to that is in the NBA during COVID this current year that's going on. We've never had more G League players play in the NBA due to guys being out with COVID and stuff. That's the closest we'll see to replacement players. I don't think we'll ever see replacement players in the NFL because I feel like it's too violent of a game. I think it also comes down to that. But to tie it back to the movie, great movie about a really interesting time in football history.
Yeah.
And it was the perfect one to kick off season 2.
Yeah, I'm happy that we did this one.
Yeah. So I want to thank you guys for watching this. And, you know, it took a while, but we got back to it. We don't quite know what movie we're going to do next, but we will be back in the next month or so with our next one. So thank you for watching. And never forget, pain heals, chicks dig scars, and glory is forever.
That's the quote.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you next
Cheers.
time.